Atlanta, Season 3, Episode 7, Trinity to the Bone. Let's talk about it.
You skinny white people!
So Trinity to the Bone, Episode 7 of Season 3 of Atlanta just aired on FX or on Hulu, depending which way you watched it. I really think that this was the first swing and a miss for Atlanta, especially for this season. This was probably the worst episode of the 7. That's really unfortunate. I know that a lot of people have been down on this season. I've kind of been defending it. I really actually enjoyed it, especially the standalone episodes, because this is the third one, and what I found out from actually somebody on my channel who subscribes told me was that the 5 episodes that they split, they showed they didn't have a full budget to film in Europe the entire season, so they split it into 5 episodes, and there are 5 that are dream episodes and 5 are with our main characters. So this was the third of the 5 dream episodes, and I felt like the 2 standalone episodes that we got earlier in the season were the 2 best of the season so far. And I expected a lot from this when I found out that this was going to be another standalone, and I was just very disappointed. The first time I watched it, I really didn't enjoy it at all. When me and my wife watched it, both of us were just like, yeah, it was alright. It just didn't feel special. It didn't have that Atlanta feel to it. Like, I mean, I get that there was a message deeper in there, and that's when I rewatched it again today before I did this review. I was trying to dive more into the message, and it just, as from an entertainment standpoint, it just didn't work, and that's unfortunate. There were still things I enjoyed in this, and I did enjoy the message. I just don't think it was presented as well as it could have been. Also, this was the first episode of the season to be directed by Donald Glover, so that's actually another disappointment. He's directing one more later in the season, so we'll see how that goes. I don't know, I just expected more. I really did. Both of the other 2 standalones actually had me, it made me feel uncomfortable, it made me feel scared, and like this one, you know, I get the message. From this point on, we're going to talk spoilers about the episode. So this episode revolves around a family, a mother, a father, and a son, and they have a babysitter, or a nanny, I guess, to take care of him. And she passes away. Her name is Sylvia. She passes away. They find out on the phone that she has died. You know, how you tell your son that their nanny has just died. But not just any nanny. This nanny is closer to him than his own parents. He actually has more of a connection to his nanny in her culture, which is Trinidad, than to his parents, because his parents are basically having their nanny raise their kids. And I think that's one of the big things that this episode is talking about. So I'm not a parent, so I can't speak on this, so, you know, take what I say with a grain of salt. But I'm assuming that what they're trying to tell you is a lot of people have kids and then they just have the nanny raise them. We've seen this in movies. I mean, one that comes into my mind because I'm a psycho, I guess, is Malibu's Most Wanted, because I always think of how he got raised and then how he turned out. You know, it's also showing us that that's okay, in a way, because this kid, you know, because his parents are white and then she was Trinidadian, her culture has rubbed off on him, and that's not a bad thing. That's just how he is, and that's how he actually feels more comfortable, and that's a good thing. You know, there was also some little gags in there that I wanted to point out. Like, for instance, in the beginning, he didn't want to eat his bread because he said it was too bland. So his father had to go get some, I believe it was Caribbean mango, just to put on it, and he can't handle the spice at all, but he can, and that's also speaking on how the joke that, you know, most white people like really bland food, they consider salt and pepper seasoning. And I'll admit, you know, for a long time before I met my wife, that's what I thought. I didn't have the most seasoned food. I didn't find out about adobo until I met my wife, so that was pretty awesome. I thought that was a really funny joke because I didn't learn a lot about seasoning until I met her, and, you know, that could be life-changing for a young lad like myself. Another thing that I wanted to point out, I mean, this could be nothing or it could be something, but Donald Glover is around my age, so I assume he was raised around the same kind of Nicktoons, but I noticed that the doctor that they're referring to is Dr. Lipschitz, which I always think of Dr. Lipschitz from the Rugrats, because that was the doctor that Tommy's mom would always be talking about, that she got all her information about being a mother from. So I thought maybe that was a nice little joke, because, like, hey, the doctor knows more about your kid than you do, so I thought that would fit in perfectly, and just to have the name Dr. Lipschitz is always kind of fun if you're a Rugrats fan, so I thought that was funny. It could be nothing, I could be just overanalyzing, I don't know. That's just me. So take that again with a grain of salt, you know, you could just blow it off and be like, this guy. The parents are starting to realize that maybe they aren't spending enough time with their son as much as they should, because the son wants to go, they explain to him that she died and that he wants to go to the funeral, and at the funeral we can see how he is connecting with everybody at the funeral, whereas the father and mother are not. The father, for instance, when he has to go park his car and, you know, he's telling the guy Richie Like, you know, I'm leaving the keys pretty much. Like, I'm leaving the keys, like, and Richie's not looking up. I mean, Richie's like, this guy's a fuck, come on. We get a nice little cameo appearance from Chet Hanks, which is nice casting for this part, as who also babysat by Sylvia many years ago. So that's kind of why he has like a Trinidadian accent and everything. And they're trying to like illustrate to the parents that, you know, if you don't raise your son right, he might end up like this guy. But this guy doesn't seem like a bad kid, but to the parents, it might seem that way just because of how they are. Because they have made comments, like maybe little racial jabs, like, for instance, when they're laying in bed, they're trying to figure out what they should do for their next nanny, and the mother says, like, oh, maybe we can go more metropolitan. Like, we still know you're saying white. You don't have to say it that way. And then, you know, then they also say, like, Chinese, and they're like, you know, that's expensive. The mother goes, Sylvia wasn't cheap. The father goes, Sylvia wasn't expensive. Meaning, you know what, that's the cheapest we can afford. And again, that's just another messed up thing. And I'm sure that these conversations really happen out in the real world. So, you know, it's a nice little thing, little touch. And then that just shows later how I feel like the father is more worried about his son, Bash than the mother is. I feel like the mother is more worried about the image of that they're putting out, and that how their son is being raised, because she wanted a Chinese nanny because she, so that the son can learn Latin or Mandarin. And that's just, again, that's just like using your child as a pawn for yourself, or as an extension of yourself when they're trying to be their own person. Again, that's why casting Chet Hanks is actually very good, because Chet Hanks has said himself that he's the black sheep of the Hanks family, which, you know, can be viewed as like, oh, he must be a bad person. Now, I don't really know Chet Hanks or anything really too much about him, but I'm just trying to get it from what the show is showing me. So I get that that's kind of like what they're going for, is like, because he seems pretty well dressed. He's the only other one at the funeral, I feel like, who was wearing a real dressed down suit and everything. He has the Bluetooth in his head, maybe illustrating to us that he is a businessman of sorts, so he's doing pretty well. But the parents might still look down at him because of how he isn't coming off like them as like ultra white, which is unfortunate. But that does happen, so I think that's what the show is another thing is trying to show us. And it's also trying to show us how other cultures react to different situations. Like, for instance, at this funeral, you know, it starts off pretty good. They're honoring her, and then, you know, one of the daughters comes up on stage as they're singing Trinity to the Bone to the whole funeral service. And she says that she was more of a mother to the children that she babysat than she was to her own children. And people are trying to defend her. She did her best. She was still providing for her children, and like some of the people in there understand. But honestly, if you were her daughter, how would you feel if you felt like she was actually raising other people's kids better than she was raising her own kids? And that raises a lot of good questions, and I really felt like the show really nailed it this time. And then from there, a fight breaks out, and then our leads in this episode try and get out of there because now they feel uncomfortable. And the one guy who earlier in the episode asked them if, like, you know, if they need a new babysitter or anything like that, he would do it. And obviously they're trying to, like, blow him off and everything, not listening, taking him seriously, because he said he also installs TVs when he can. I, too, install TVs when I can. So it was actually pretty cool seeing, like, later in the episode, he's trying to calm everyone down, and he asked the kid if he was scared, and he explains that we're just sad, and this is how we grieve, and that's not wrong. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody tell you that? Like, everyone grieves different. Some people do it through humor. Some people do it through anger. Some people do it through sadness and crying. So everybody grieves different. And I think that's another thing that they were trying to show you. Like, just because you do something one way doesn't mean that somebody else does it the same way. You have to respect other people's ways of doing things. Not the way you do things is the right way, and not the way that somebody else does something is the wrong way. And I feel like that is a deep message in this that I really did appreciate. So I was glad to see that. But then as things wrap up at the end, we get the father gets finally, for the second time, he gets another thing addressed to Sylvia, which were pictures of his son and Sylvia, kind of at, like, you know, a Sears portrait studio. And I think I was just showing again that he was more of a son to her than he is a son to them. You know, take that for what you will, but I think it had a good message. But like I said, I just felt like out of the episodes this season, this was the weakest. I just didn't enjoy it that much. I didn't get that feeling that I've gotten through the other 6 episodes. And I feel like actually after last week was another kind of like down episode. I felt like the season started really strong and it's kind of like tapered out a little bit. I'm still enjoying it. I'm still really excited for the last 3 episodes of this season. Don't get me wrong. It's still Atlanta. It's still one of my favorite shows on TV. I'm sure that they will, save the ship because they just know what they're doing. So, still a good message. Still worth your time. Still should probably check it out. Hey, you might even have a different opinion than me. You might enjoy this episode. Who knows? So anyway, give yourself a shot at it. Maybe you like it. And then if you think I'm missing the whole point of this episode, or maybe something went over my head and I might be able to experience it a little better, please leave a comment in the comment section below. And as always, guys, thank you for being a fan of Let's Talk. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and tell all your friends.